I don't have any problem with measuring how strong a child is in reading or math. What I do have a problem with is when the tests start to drive everything else that's happening in school.
We can't have the concept of opting out apply to public education more broadly. This is not an a la carte operation.
Once upon a time, there was a thinking that if all schools had every child take the same test, we'd be able to get a solid handle on how well the educational process was working in various districts, while at the same time being able to better monitor how well our teachers were doing. This was the idea, of course. But standardized testing has become the equivalent of a four-letter word for so many people, so much so that parents are taking the matters into their own hands. And in the process, some say could be doing more damage than good. Let's get some reality. Our guest is a former school teacher in the Bronx, New York, now senior fellow at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. Welcome Robert Pondiscio to MidPoint. Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Robert, let's get right down to this, because there are parents now basically saying that the students, they want to urge their own students, their kids, to boycott standardized testing. Why is this? First, let's look at the negative. Why would this be a bad idea, if at all?
Ooh, well, no, it has ramifications. Education reform runs on data, so to speak, and data is testing. And when you opt out of testing, you're basically robbing the system of the data it needs to make decisions. So if you're in favor of things like choice and charters, we probably wouldn't have those things if it were not for the rich data that we were getting from testing over the years that showed that, look, some of our schools are great, some of them are terrible. Testing data is how we know which is which.
But is there a positive then? And I'm going to look at the other side of this. Some who say that these standard tests subject all the students and basic progress and competency on a one-size-fits-all approach, and that is simply the wrong way to test kids.
Boy, that's how much time do we have, Ed? That's a complicated question. Life is one size fits all to a degree, right? It's and forgive me, I'm getting feedback in here, so I'm hearing my own words. It's a bit distracting. Testing is the folks who tend to opt out of testing, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush because we don't know a full picture of who is driving the opt-out movement. But as a general rule, what little we know is that parents who opt their kids out of tests tend to be affluent, white, suburban, for example, in places like New York, New Jersey. Not exclusively, but for the most part. Now, the types of students that I worked with and still work with to this day tend to be low-income minority students in places like the South Bronx and Harlem. They're the ones whose schools are really are suffering, and testing has really created the charter movement and school choice in communities like that that's really improved outcomes for kids. So these test scores don't exist in a vacuum. Now, having said that, I'm deeply sympathetic to parents who say, look, the testing tail has started to wag the educational dog. I think they're exactly right about that. But it's incumbent upon folks like me to explain why testing is important, why the data is meaningful, and frankly, to be more realistic in terms of, I'm not sure, I think we have overreached a little bit in the ed reform movement in terms of attempting to attach test scores to individual teachers. That creates this kind of very high pressure environment, and it ends up that the kids are the ones who are facing that pressure, and that's not right either.
Is there any way to get the same sort of data that we're talking about here, at least to help education move along, help the kids, help us know what the teachers are doing without having to go through a standardized test?
Well, I just don't think that standardized tests are the problem, honestly. I mean, if you're over the age of 40 like I am, you probably remember going to school and testing was just another day. We had standardized tests when we were kids. What we didn't have is this infrastructure around it, the accountability that, again, test scores were attached to individual teachers. I'm sure if we had that 30, 40 years ago, then our teachers back then would have been sweating us to do well on the tests as well. So, I've got a complicated relationship with all this. I think that testing should not be the most important day of the school. It should just be like going to the doctor, just another day of school. But I don't think that's a realistic goal.
Robert, I want to stop you right there if I can.
A little bit of the accountability.
I want to stop you right there. I only got 60 seconds left, but what you just said I think is interesting. Testing is not the end all. Isn't there something else that we can be doing? A lot of parents say, wait a minute, we shouldn't be testing, we should be teaching more than testing. Do you agree with that?
Well, yes and no, but I mean, consider if I'm guessing a lot of the same parents who are opting out of standardized tests are very eager to have their kids take the SAT or the ACT for college entrance. So it really is a question of why am I taking this test? What's the benefit to me? I do think that there is benefits to all students from standardized testing. I'm just not sure that, again, I think the tail has begun to wag the dog a little bit. I don't want to go back to the day where it was just send more money and trust the teacher, because we know that was failing kids. But we have to kind of strike a proper balance here and keep the tests, but try to dial down the pressure around them.
Well, I think you've just said the really important thing there. Dial down some of the pressure on some of these kids. Let them know the testing is there, but don't make them think that every single second and every single test will basically decide when you take it in 6th grade that it will decide if you're going to go to medical school one day, which I think
that's exactly right. I mean, you show me a kid
that.
who is being pressured on testing, and I'll show you a teacher who's pressuring him.
There you go, and that's exactly what we have to stop. Robert, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. It's a fascinating topic. We have to keep looking forward to it. We have to teach our kids better every single day. Thank you so much. We'll talk again.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, when we come back, how about some fat stories? Really? You want to go there? Krispy Kreme donuts for all. MidPoint continues.